The good news is we're all in this together. And when we see we're together, we can work things out. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and the famous Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
This is a two-handed introduction here. Every day I get up and check the news, find what I can about energy and climate change, and I put together a synopsis of about 50 words for each article I find, and I attach a link to the original article and put them up at my blog, which is geoharvey.com, Geoharvey. There's a calendar up there. We're going to try to keep you aware of what days the articles that we're talking about come from. We pick about 20 articles that are the best of the blog. I knew you were going to say that.
21 articles.
21 articles, yeah.
3 a day.
3 a day, roughly 3 a day. Sometimes 22, sometimes 20, or even 19, but you know, that's what we do. And
well, as I usually say, some of these things are really worth pursuing because they're good articles, they're well written.
They are.
And sometimes they're fun. I mean, there's one of them I'm going to remind you of today. It's got a nice slideshow in it.
Yes, there's a couple of them that they do that every week. Usually, we've got
some
something.
Good stuff in sometimes.
Yeah.
So look it up.
Absolutely.
Go by the day. Well, George, tell us
click
how
on
to
the
do it.
calendar. There's a calendar there. Usually there's a calendar there. A couple of weeks ago it disappeared. Who knows what's going on in the minds of the people at WordPress.
Gremlins.
Gremlins, that's right. The calendar you can click on, or you can just scroll down until you get the right date. But I put up about 10 to 15 articles a day. And so when we're reporting on a week's news, we're reporting on over 100 news items.
So you're going to be searching. You're going to find a lot of news items we don't talk about.
That's right, a lot. Anyway, I wanted to start off today with, and by the way, today is as we're recording this, is the 9th of November, and the day that we're starting with is the 2nd of November.
Right.
Right? Yeah, okay. I got an email this morning from Joseph Mangum. We've talked about him a bunch of times. He's in Puerto Rico helping out. And people who are watching this show on a computer setup will see a link somewhere that they can click on to go to his GoFundMe website. But he got $5,000 from the GoFundMe website and was off to Puerto Rico with five solar systems. Yeah, and I wanted to read his email.
One of the things he brought is I thought was really appropriate.
Yeah.
Straws.
Yes.
That you can use to purify water.
Just purify water.
You just suck the dirty water up, and the straw cleans out all the crap.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is.
It's just a little straw.
It's a little straw. He had other water purification systems. The email says, long story short, the focus has been on San Juan Metro. This is the focus of activity in Puerto Rico by the people who are restoring everything there. Old San Juan tourist area is flooded with Red Cross, FEMA, National Guard, and so forth, all drinking beer and hanging out. The interior of the island is largely forgotten. I'm sure that there are people in FEMA who would say, that's not what I was doing. But, you know, this is what Joseph is saying. It's his perceptions. The interior of the island is largely forgotten. The mountains could just as well be Timbuktu. Devastation is everywhere. Rosemary's grandmother, Rosemary is his wife, Rosemary's grandmother's neighborhood is all hazardous poles in the middle of the street hanging down. There are literally power cables running along her outer fence in the front yard. Those with means are okay. They can take a trip to a larger coastal town and buy food, gas, and water for the food, water, and gas for their generators. The poor are literally out in the rain. Most had barely running cars that Maria finished, and they also lost houses, garages, tools, etc. There is no water and no power, and power will be years away. There are
years.
Years. That's what he's saying. There are dogs everywhere because the owners fled or the dogs just ran in terror. This was a point that bothered Mark deeply. Mark was the friend of his who works in a solar place in Keene.
Okay.
And I forget his last name. Everything is tough on the heart and mind. However, my friends and I have linked up with some really good projects. To give you a quick rundown, we have installed systems in 2 areas of awesome importance. One is a greenhouse working on organic vegetables that grow in the tropics. So far, they have been able to feed folks, but needed more seeds and a small power source. Joseph took seeds down for the greenhouse. The solar and donations saved both problems. The other was a mushroom farm, focusing on raising local edible mushrooms as medicinal and food purposes. What a lovely crew there. The focus of my mission has changed to rebuilding and food delivery. I will be taking pictures as best I can without being intrusive or evasive. Hope this will suffice for now. We'll talk soon.
So he's a real hero.
Well, you know, he went down there.
Going down there,
He's down there. Yep.
literally
On the
rolling
ground.
up his sleeves and
That's
getting
right.
to work.
That's right.
Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to give Joseph some support, you can go to the GoFundMe site, and my daily blog entries have a link to the GoFundMe site every day. So if you just scroll down, you're going to find it. Okay, we're starting on Thursday, November 2nd. We have a picture
You got
to
a
start
picture
with.
coming up here.
That's a weird picture.
Come on, picture. Come on, picture. There we
There
go.
we go. Okay, and this is
Interesting with the windmills in the background.
yes, it is. This is from the Guardian.
You have any idea where that picture is?
I have no idea.
Renewable energy photo. It's just from Getty Images, so we
Yeah.
don't know. Okay, this is high private sector investment puts Paris climate target in reach.
A report
High
says
private sector investment. Okay.
that's right. A report says at least $1 trillion are being invested globally in ways to reduce the threat of climate change, including renewable power, energy efficiency, public transportation. Investments like these make it possible for world governments to meet their commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate change.
Absolutely.
There you go. Should we move on?
The quick takeaway
Okay.
here is this. People in developing countries can benefit from renewable energy installations that provide local power, removing the need for them to be connected to a national electricity grid.
Yes.
At the end, I'm going to mention that because I was listening to Vermont Public Radio yesterday.
Yep.
And they had Mary Powell on there from
Good.
Green Mountain
Green
Power.
Mountain Power, yeah.
And the woman who heads up the Vermont Electric Co-op.
Yes.
And another guy who works basically for the grid.
Yes.
You know, and they were talking about it, and what they were saying was interesting. And when we get to it, I'll mention it.
All right.
So let's move along here.
Okay. We've got an item from the Montreal Gazette.
This is a good technical article. This is an interesting article.
You probably want to change this to
Yeah, I might
picture.
as well.
That picture's boring.
I'll get back here.
There you
The
go.
biggest stock collapse in world history. This is crazy.
This is crazy. 10 years after petrochemical peaked on its first day in trading in Shanghai, I wonder how many people still own stock from that first day of trading. I'll bet some do. The state-owned energy producer has lost $800 billion of market value, a sum large enough to circle the earth 31 times with $100 bills.
That's an interesting
Who thinks of
metaphor.
stuff like that?
Who's got that many $100 bills?
I don't know. And in current dollar terms, it's the world's biggest ever wipeout of shareholder wealth, and it may only get worse. How much worse can it get?
This is interesting because in this article, right in the beginning, there's a graph
Yeah.
since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2007, the stock went whoops, and then
Yeah.
and it stayed there ever since.
Yeah.
You know, it's just been fluctuating a little bit. Crazy.
Crazy. But you know, I'm kind of expecting something like that to hit other organizations in the oil industry because of
Well, this was the Chinese government, wasn't it? They own PetroChina.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a mixed socialism, capitalism thing.
Yeah.
And they're not getting either one of them quite right.
There's no group of people historically that have been as more capitalistic than the Chinese.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And I think that was true under communism. I just don't know.
It was just a different kind of
It
capitalism.
was a different kind of, yeah.
State capitalism.
Yes, and it was all a matter of how much of the state did you own. Okay. We have an item next from KVIA El Paso.
This is almost similar, but not.
Yeah.
The first coal bankruptcy of the Trump era.
President Trump has declared an end to the war on coal in quotes. But coal country is grappling with a powerful market force. More evidence of coal's challenges came as Armstrong Energy, a Western Kentucky coal company, filed for bankruptcy protection. Armstrong recently warned it would lay off workers at 2 of its facilities. Those facilities are in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And who is from Kentucky? Mitch McConnell, I think.
Rand Paul.
Rand Paul.
Jr. Or what's
Yeah.
Yeah, it is Rand, isn't it? Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, at some point, Mitch McConnell is going to have to say, sorry, guys, these coal jobs are not coming.
Well, it's politics. I mean, Trump is trying to say it's renewables, and he's trying to say they need subsidies, and he's trying to give them subsidies.
Yeah, and libertarians are not going to go with that.
Well, I don't think so, because it's going to cost money. They want tax breaks, you know.
Yes.
They don't want the taxes
And the
going
tax
up.
breaks that they want are huge compared to what's going to renewables.
So anyhow, there's a takeaway here. Those who follow coal remain skeptical about Trump's ability to fix what are largely market-driven, not regulatory, challenges. Meanwhile, renewable energy keeps getting cheaper, creating more headaches for coal. Bingo.
Yeah. Okay, we're up to Friday, November 3rd. We have a picture here
already?
from
Got a picture coming up here.
Bloomberg.
Let's see if I can get this one up.
Got an item from Bloomberg.
I bet you I can.
There you go.
Bingo.
Yeah. Wow.
Renewables are starting to crush aging U.S. nukes and coal plants.
Doesn't it sound like what we were just talking about?
It kind of follows on to what we were just saying.
In parts of the U.S., it has become less expensive proposition to build new solar and wind farms and raise their power than use their power than keep existing and aging fleet of coal and nuclear generators producing electricity, according to financial advisor Lazard Limited. Now, this is an article from Bloomberg, but this article was reflected all through the media.
Well, this is reality. This is economic reality.
It is cheaper in some cases if you've got a coal plant running, not one that's 50 years old and getting old.
You got a new one.
If you've got a new one, sometimes it's cheaper just to shut it down and replace it.
We've seen that. We've talked about it.
We have.
There's an interesting takeaway here.
Mm-hmm.
The drop in renewable energy costs is already changing how utilities operate.
Right.
American Electric Power Company, which is a huge company, okay, once the biggest burner of coal in the U.S., is now planning to invest $4.5 billion in wind power. It's actually more than that. And it has said it could stop burning the fossil fuel altogether. AEP is doing this because it is the cheapest way to provide energy. And we're going to talk about this again.
We will. Okay, our next item is from the Japan Times.
I'm just looking at the picture, but we just saw that picture.
The picture
Yep. U.S. Energy Chief says fossil fuels could help prevent sexual assaults in Africa. Huh? What?
Rick Perry got a lot of static about this. U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry suggested that the expansion of fossil fuel use in Africa would help protect people there from sexual assault. The comment was followed by a swift rebuke from environmental activists. The Sierra Club, and not just environmental activists either. The Sierra Club, which campaigns for increased use of wind and solar power, called for Perry to resign. And you know, Perry's made a bunch of very questionable statements or requests or whatever in the last...
Why am I not surprised?
I don't know.
The interesting thing here, the statement he made has an essence of truth to it.
Yeah.
But it was totally inappropriate in the context.
Yeah.
Why? And here's what the Sierra Club had to say about it. To suggest that fossil fuel development will decrease sexual assault is not only blatantly untrue, it is an inexcusable attempt to minimize a serious and pervasive issue.
Yeah.
And of course, the Rocky Mountain Institute shed a little light on the matter to make a pun here. Electric light through solar-powered streetlights can also improve women's safety and ability to participate in nighttime activities, which is true.
Yeah.
You know, you put in streetlights and suddenly the night opens up.
Yeah.
You know?
And
But he took this way out of context.
way. he tied it with,
I don't know. I don't know
fossil
where he was
fuels.
coming from.
I don't know.
And it wasn't. It couldn't have been what he was smoking. It must have been what he was drinking.
I don't know. Anyway, we've got
another image coming up.
We have
here.
an image here and an item from Offshore Wind
Let's
Journal.
get the image up first here. Nice,
There you go.
nice picture of some
A blue image.
windmills here.
Yeah.
Offshore wind can create millions of U.S. households, can power millions of U.S. households, and create thousands of jobs.
Yep.
This is a long and informative article.
Right.
It's worth reading.
I don't know where that wind farmer is, but it's certainly not in the United States.
No, we don't have anything that big.
No.
It's probably off Denmark somewhere. Or
In the
North
yeah,
Sea.
Yeah. The states of Massachusetts, New York, and Rhode Island released reports setting out contexts for development of offshore wind power in the Northeast and revealing potential economic benefits. The Northeast could see offshore wind development of between 4,000 and 8,000 megawatts by 2030, creating 36,000 jobs.
Now that's the potential for wind development just in the Northeast. That's
Right.
like from the tip of Long Island up to Maine.
Yeah,
And
that's just
4,000 and 8,000 megawatts is not hay, but
No,
it's not huge either.
It's not huge. It's for offshore wind power. That would be the equivalent of perhaps if it's 8,000 megawatts, it would be the equivalent of about 8 Vermont Yankees, given the difference in capacity factors.
Yeah, I'll buy that. Well, 8,000 megawatts is 8 gigawatts.
Yeah,
The total installed electrical generation capacity is 1,000 gigawatts
yeah.
right now.
So this is not even
a big,
No, but it's
but it's big for local. It's
yeah,
certainly
it's
big for Massachusetts.
local, and it is significant. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
big, but it's significant.
Well, it's the first.
Yeah,
You know, this is the first development of the offshore sea
we're
coast.
just seeing it start.
There's a lot of potential there.
There's a lot of potential. There's more potential than we could generate more power from offshore wind than we need.
We could,
Yeah.
yes, we could.
Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica, still Friday, November 3rd.
Louisville, Kentucky struggles with health issues related to poor air quality.
This is
a long article. If you
it's-
got time, it's worth reading.
Yeah, and it's really kind of disturbing. In fact, I'm going to say not kind of disturbing, it's quite disturbing. Louisville, Kentucky has problems with air pollution, and some areas of the city are worse than others. Residents in poorer neighborhoods of Louisville, those closest to the city's industrial areas, have a life expectancy that is 11 years shorter than those in more upscale neighborhoods where trees, parks, and green spaces are common. 11
the
years.
key word there is trees, because that's
Yeah.
what this is all about.
Yep.
They've got a project called the Louisville Green Heart.
Yes.
It's about planting trees.
Yes.
And there's a scientific basis for planting trees because the leaves have tiny hairs on them.
Yes.
This is from the article, that trap some of the particulates in the air.
Yes.
And it's the particulates that are causing the problems.
Yeah, and the particulates are coming primarily from burning fossil fuels.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you know,
Well, Louisville's in
see
Kentucky.
We see a light out of this. There's a light at the end of the tunnel here. It's a very clear way to go, and it's one. But you know, the thing that's disturbing about this is Americans under the Constitution have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That's what they say.
And these people's lives are being cut short by a big amount on average.
There's
11
a
years.
lawsuit out that's that's working on that premise.
Bunch of them. In fact, there was a
There's
new
one
law.
of them we've talked about on the show.
We've got one coming up later in this show too. Okay, we are up to Saturday,
Move along
November
to
4th.
Saturday.
And we have
Another
a
picture coming up.
here. Yeah, there we go. That looks
Come
very
on, picture.
a bucolic wind farm.
Instead of the picture, I got you.
Yeah, that's right.
Here we go. And where is that? That's
The Thunder Ranch.
Thunder Ridge. Oh, this is an interesting wind farm.
Yeah.
Do I have the right one? Yeah.
You do.
Long-awaited U.S. tax reform signals continued undermining of renewables.
U.S.
Good
Republic.
article. It's long, but
Yeah.
it's worth pursuing. There's a lot of meat there.
U.S. Republicans finally published their proposed tax plan to much ballyhoo and recriminations, not only among Democrats, but also in the country's renewable energy industry, which is likely to lose thousands of jobs and billions in investment if it passes.
It's an interesting bill. I mean, this is the tax bill they're debating
Yeah.
right now. It will eliminate the electrical vehicle tax credit,
Yes.
axes the permanent 10% investment tax credit for solar and geothermal, and reduce the production tax credit for wind power by more than a third.
Yeah.
But it keeps in place breaks and provisions for oil and gas companies.
Who do you think this is benefiting? And now the
Which have
next
been in place for 100 years.
Yes, and the next thing that you have to ask is, do you really think this is going to pass? I mean, you've got states in this country that you can break down a couple of different ways. But one thing you can say is, you've got blue states.
Yeah.
All right, are they going to go for this? Probably not. You've got red states, but I want to break them down into two groups. One is the states that are profoundly in favor of renewable power, and the other is the ones that are not. Now, the ones that are profoundly in favor of renewable power include Iowa, for example, Oklahoma,
Because they're getting a lot of wind.
Texas.
Yeah.
We're starting to talk about places where this whole concept could fall apart because there's a huge,
Economics, baby.
a third of the wind generation in the United States is happening in Texas. There are a lot of jobs down there, and those jobs are threatened by this Republican bill.
So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. My wallet or my ideology.
Yes, and okay, here's the next thing. Yes, Texas has always been a state with oil in its background.
Yeah.
But the oil isn't going to last forever, and everybody knows it. And
That's a fact.
you know, I've talked about the Roscoe Wind Farm. If you find out the coordinates for that, and you look at Google Earth at those coordinates, you can see satellite images of the wind turbines.
Okay.
All right, they're all over the place. You can also see among them
The
oil pumps.
Oil pumps, yep.
And the oil pumps clearly are almost all, at least, non-operational.
They're dormant, huh?
I wouldn't say dormant. Some of them
They're
are lying
dead.
there in pieces.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of them have been removed. Some of them have little oil spills next to them where the prairie has been turned black. Anyway. Should we go on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Our next item is from Inhabitat.
And it's entitled, New Smart Grid Solution Heals Itself Amid Central Grid Outages. This is an interesting
It
article.
is, but one of the things that's interesting is it basically takes stuff that we've been talking about ever since we started the show.
Yeah,
where
really.
We're talking about cells that can mutually support each other. Renewable energy may offer emissions-free electricity, but it isn't always easy for electric grids to integrate that energy. Dutch company Alphen is launching their answer to this dilemma. The cellular smart grid platform allows a central grid to be divided into smaller grids that can operate independently if necessary and even self-heal.
Well, this is microgrids that we've been
It's
talking about.
microgrids. And if by self-healing, what does that mean? It means that a little microgrid can say, oh, the next microgrid over is in operation. So we'll hook them together.
Bingo. So, self-healing.
Self-healing, yeah.
And all of this can be operated by a laptop.
Well, you take this computer and you compare it to the first computer that I ever worked with.
Yeah.
The first computer that I ever worked with, the memory in it cost $1 a bit when it was first manufactured.
Yeah.
Well,
And the whole thing lived in a building the size of this one.
yeah, and this little computer would have trillions of dollars worth of memory in it at those prices, and it's thousands of times as fast, and it's thousands of times as efficient, and that computer needed 3 air conditioners just to cool it off. This thing only uses 5 watts. What are we talking about here?
There's a good infographic in this article.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it's called How a Smart Electric Grid Could Reduce Emissions by 68% in the United States.
Yes.
And it's a slideshow. It's a very good infographic.
Yes.
You can learn a lot from reading it.
Yes.
And it's fun.
And it's fun. Okay, we're up to Sunday, November 5th.
Well, we got another
and we
picture
have a slide here of...
another picture.
This looks like modern art.
Donald Trump accused of obstructing satellite research into climate change. He wouldn't do a thing like that.
President Trump is accused of deliberately obstructing research on global warming, blocking a critically important technique for investigating sea ice cover at the poles. The row has erupted over a key polar satellite that broke down a few days ago, leaving the United States with only 3 aging satellites, and the only backup was ordered to be dismantled. Ordered to be dismantled.
That's interesting.
Why?
There's no chance that a new one now can be launched until 2023 or later.
Clearly, they're
None of
trying
the current satellites will still be running.
And the whole purpose of this is because they want people not to know what's happening.
Bingo.
And the reason why they are dismantling the satellite is because they don't want to pay for storage.
Yeah, that's very expensive.
What in the world these people got on their minds? Clearly.
That's just a red herring. They don't want us seeing it.
They don't want people to know what's happening.
Well, the takeaway from this came from the article. Apparently, the Trump administration is trying to block studies of global warming for ideological reasons.
Well, we knew that already.
We know that.
Yeah.
The people that watch this show know that.
Yeah. But the thing that I keep thinking is, at some point, the administration of this country is going to change. Now, you were mentioning earlier that we saw that 2 days ago in the
With the
with
local election results.
And the CNN was doing interviews of people coming out of the out of the elections in Virginia, and asking how did you vote? Why did you vote the way you did? And it was clear to them that the reason why the Democrats won in Virginia, as big as they did, which was big, was because people disapproved of Donald Trump.
That's what's going on.
And I think a lot of this has to do with exactly this kind of story. We've got a very small group of people, it might be as few as 3 or even 2, who are basically warping the American political movement. And if the conservatives don't face this, they're going to be destroyed.
Well, it's interesting because the results of this election, the conservatives and the progressives were disapproving of Trump.
Yes.
You know, he's got something right in the middle there. That's his base.
What I'm saying is,
but the libertarians and the traditional conservatives aren't happy either.
We've got the libertarians not wanting to see coal given subsidies, as we mentioned earlier, and so nobody is going to be happy with this administration in the end. But the conservatives,
I think they're not happy now.
Yeah, but the conservatives are the ones who stand to lose the biggest.
Yes,
because the Democrats are united against it, and the conservatives are divided between.
They're in left field right now.
They're divided between libertarians, real conservatives who are not necessarily libertarians, and a third group which is entirely motivated by
fascism,
fossil fuel industries. Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's move along here.
So
the Trump administration. This is an interesting article.
Yep.
Trump administration issues report confirming global warming.
Okay. This is from Bloomberg. I mean, this isn't some crank organization that's making up news as it goes. The Trump administration released a sweeping federal climate report concluding that the Earth is warming at an alarming rate due to human activity. The congressionally mandated report said the Earth is undergoing the warmest period, quote, in the history of modern civilization, end quote, fueled primarily by the rising levels of carbon dioxide. Actually, it's the warmest period in the last, I don't know how many million years, but that was something that was out last week. But this is a congressionally mandated report.
Yep.
That is left over from previous administrations.
Yep.
So the Trump administration may not have wanted to release it, but they didn't have a choice.
It seems like maybe they did, but they didn't take it. I don't know. Maybe they just couldn't figure out how to explain it. Because from the article here, scientists were concerned the White House would alter the findings. Duh.
Yes. Well.
In the end, the report was issued as the scientists wrote it.
You know, somebody in this administration, I think, is undermining it. I think there's somebody out there who is trying to do their job, and that means that they're undermining the administration.
Well, this article certainly is a surprise.
Yes, it is. But at the same time, we've seen, you know, the kids in Oregon with their lawsuit.
Yeah.
And I said earlier, we're going to be seeing lawsuits. Well, 2 days after this report was issued, a lawsuit came.
A different lawsuit.
A different lawsuit. And, you know, all of these things they're going to converge. And if the Trump administration imagines that a conservative Supreme Court is just going to say, well, we're conservatives and Trump is conservative, and I don't think so. I don't think that's something you can count on.
Well, you got Kennedy, he's a swing vote. You know, he's technically conservative, but he's not all the time.
The history of the Supreme Court, the whole history of the Supreme Court is replete with people who have been put in by some president who expected those justices to behave the way they're supposed to, and they say, wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. Sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do. Okay, well, should we move on from that one?
This is kind of on the same theme.
Okay.
Climate talks open amid anger over Trump's coal support.
This is so completely mind-boggling. This is from BBC News. To the anger of environmentalists, a Trump advisor is expected to take part in a presentation at COP23, the UN's climate conference in Bonn, promoting coal as a solution for climate change. What? Separately, a group of governors will say that the United States is still committed to climate action despite Mr. Trump's rejection of the Paris Agreement. Well, Trump...
So that's individual states are saying, we don't care if Trump isn't going to obey the Paris Agreement.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah, and we've talked about these states. I mean, the same day that Trump said the United States is out of the agreement, you had a bunch of governors coming forth.
12 of them, I think.
Well, there were 3 initially. But, and one of them was Jerry Brown in California. But they came forward and said, Trump may be out of this, the federal government may be out of it, we're in. And now they have expanded, I believe, to 14 states, and then there's a whole bunch of cities and towns and counties and you name it. And when you put all of these governmental organizations together, you discover that they represent over 50% of the population in the United States. In fact, well over 50%. I think it's 54% or something like that.
It's interesting because what these speakers were going to talk about was the role coal can take in protecting the Earth from climate change.
What kind of, what are they doing here?
This came from the article.
I know.
Fossil fuels having any role in tackling climate change is beyond absurd. It is dangerous.
No, I don't think that's quite true. I think the fossil fuels industry could have a big role in tackling climate change.
Yeah, by closing
shutting down.
Okay. Let's move along. Monday, November 6th.
There you go.
Oh, we got a nice picture.
We
here.
do indeed.
This is a fun
kind
picture.
of. It's not really a pretty picture, but it's a fun picture. It's not ugly.
Well, that is a guitar. Yes. And it's in Nashville. Where else? Okay.
Where else would it be?
But that's a solar roof.
Yes.
And what does
a
it
guitar
say?
with a solar roof. What does what say?
Nashville Music Center.
Yeah. And it's credited to Roof Meadow. And this is from Inside Climate News.
This is an interesting article. It's long and there's a lot of pictures in it. So
Yes.
it's a fun article.
It's a fun article.
2 reasons solar is booming in Trump country. I'm getting my tongue is getting in the way of my eye teeth, so I couldn't see what I was saying.
Okay.
Two reasons solar is booming in Trump country: price and energy independence.
Yes.
And that second part is important.
It's important. Despite the lack of renewable energy-friendly policies and reluctance from Republican-led state legislatures to address climate change, states across the South and Appalachia are rapidly expanding their solar markets. Utilities are investing in solar projects which are now cost competitive with coal and gas.
Well, takeaway again from the article: whether or not you think global warming is a major concern, finding a cheaper source of power is something we can all agree on.
Yeah.
Economics.
Economics
again.
Yes. We can agree on a bunch of other things, like maybe it's not such a good idea to allow people to get sick the way they do, but you know. Okay, our next item is from Think Geoenergy.
Okay, renewables. Oh, yeah, better get.
Let's get us up there.
Get
There you
us
go.
up there. Renewables.
The IT is still covered.
Renewables becoming cost competitive with only geothermal providing baseload. And I got a little problem with that one. I think, what about hydro?
What about batteries?
Well, they're not quite there yet, but they
I think
will
the
look
batteries are
very
getting
much
there.
like they're
Yeah.
going to be supplying baseload.
Lazard has released its annual levelized cost of electricity analysis, LCOE 11.0, with
This
analysis.
includes everything,
Yeah,
right?
it's everything, yeah. With analysis of power costs, it shows a continued decline in the cost of generating electricity from alternative energy technologies, especially utility-scale solar and wind. But energy storage is not yet cost competitive in most applications.
That's changing rapidly.
It's changing rapidly. The day this happened, or the day after, I guess it was Tuesday, I got a note from the editor of Clean Technica asking me if I'd like to write an article on this.
Uh-huh.
So before I could write the article, Steve Hanley, who also writes for Clean Technica, is very good, wrote an article. But Zach Shahan sent me a thing saying, "You write another one anyway. You know, it's always
Okay.
good to have multiple opinions." So I did, and what I said was I was disappointed with the Lazard analysis, because I've been seeing, you know, if you go to the internet day after day after day after day after day,
You see things,
you
don't you?
see things. And one of the things that I always pay attention to is power purchase agreements, because they're a really good gauge on what's going on in the world. And I looked at the
Yeah, it's
Lazard.
like finger on the pulse.
Yeah, I looked at the Lazard analysis for this, and I said to myself, wait a minute. The power purchase agreements that I've been seeing are not within their range of possibilities. Like, a good example is this thing that happened a few months ago at Tucson Electric, where they had a power purchase agreement for 100 megawatts of solar energy with battery backup. And the solar energy was less than 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and the battery backup brought it to 4.5. But Lazard is saying that they would expect that a typical solar plus battery system would cost about 8.5. 4.5, 8.5. That's a big difference.
And it's going lower.
And it's going lower.
We've seen them in Oman where they're down to about $1.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. But nevertheless, I just want to tell people, this particular article came from Think Geoenergy. Think Geoenergy is about geothermal power. So they're promoting geothermal power. That's why.
Okay, that explains that.
Yes, it does.
There is logic.
There is logic in this world. Our next item is from Clean Technica.
This is an interesting one, too. This is a good article coming up.
Yep.
Rick Perry masks concentrating solar power plot.
Oh my
It's a plot with more weird words.
Thank you, Rick Perry. You know, he could probably make a lot of money as a comedian.
We got a picture of exactly this thing coming up a little bit later.
Yeah.
We'll talk about
As
it.
Rick Perry makes one laughable statement after another, the Department of Energy goes about its renewable energy mission full steam ahead. Wait a minute. A new article appeared in the DOE's website on November 3rd under the title, quote, "Concentrating solar power could provide the flexibility and reliability of the U.S. electric grid that the U.S. electric grid needs, end quote. That's the
I'll
title.
clarify a little bit what concentrating solar power is.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not photovoltaic.
Yeah,
It's not something you can put on your roof.
yeah,
They collect solar energy from sprawling fields of specialized mirrors or troughs. And
Yeah.
we've seen some of these.
yes. In fact,
And
we've
they've-
got one coming up.
We got one coming up. Yep. Focuses on receivers, which are usually located at the top of a tower.
Yep.
Okay, so all this heat is going up in that tower.
It's like, the magnifying glass and
Yeah, exactly.
burning the wood.
That's a good analogy. It is like a magnifying glass. So the receiver contains a heat transfer fluid that's then circulated through the system to generate steam
Yeah.
in the old-fashioned way,
Yeah.
which powers a turbine to produce electricity. And there's a plus here because the heat is the primary product of these concentrated solar panel plants. They can store the heat.
They can store it.
Okay, so it'll operate at night.
Yeah. So they have,
So all you need is an array of solar tanks to hold the hot fluid for a while.
yep, and they have actually built these things that will keep going for 24 hours.
Now, they're not going to work in Vermont.
Not yet.
Not
They've
yet.
got them in France.
They got them in Spain. Is it France or Spain?
Yeah, it was
we
France.
saw one
We
of
saw a
those.
beautiful one in southern France.
But mostly these are going up in the desert southwest, which is just perfect location.
It's perfect
for it.
location, yeah. Should we move on?
Let's see, is there anything else here? No, I think we can move on.
Okay, we're up to Tuesday, November 7th,
And we
and
got a
we
picture.
have a picture of the Windcatcher project in Oklahoma and an article from the Digital Journal.
Let's get that picture up here.
Yeah, let's do that.
There we go.
There you go.
AEP, we talked about them already.
Absolutely.
Invests $1.8 billion in new renewable generation through 2020.
Yeah.
This article will tell you they're investing much more than that.
Yes. American Electric Power introduced its increasing capital involvement, announced its increasing capital involvement in its regulated operations and new renewable generation over the next 3 years to provide more advanced, cleaner energy solutions for its customers. The company plans to invest $1.8 billion in renewable generation during 2018 to 2020. But as you said, Tom, this is just a small part of what they're doing.
Well, we talked about this Windcatcher project
Yes.
before.
Yes.
I don't think we called it by that, but this is in what they call the Oklahoma Panhandle.
Yes.
That little strip of land that's on top of Texas.
Yep.
It's all the way over in the western end of it, and it's big.
It's big.
This is a very large generation thing. It's $4.5 billion.
Yeah.
And the article says $1.8 billion. So this is dwarfing whatever else they're spending.
Yeah.
The facility will be the largest wind farm in the U.S. and the second largest in the world. It's 2,000 megawatts. That's 2 gigawatts.
Yep.
That's about a quarter of the total potential for wind in the Northeast that we already talked about.
Okay.
Off of Massachusetts.
Yes, a quarter of the offshore
Yeah,
wind that we were talking
so
about.
this
yeah.
is big.
Okay.
And let's see, okay, it's going to be 800 turbines. 800 turbines.
800 turbines.
And construction has begun already, and operations are expected to begin in 2020.
I want to point out to people, when you have 800 turbines, if you look at that picture, you
Let's
want
get
to
it
put
back
that
up
back
there
up,
again.
you can see that
There's more than 800 turbines in this. No, it doesn't look like this.
yeah, but you can see that under those turbines they've got what looks
got
like
farms.
farms, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they are. That's not just plowed land.
Well, it's early in the season. They just plowed the land. I bet you it's corn.
No, I don't think
You don't
that's
think
corn.
so?
I think those rows are too wide for corn. My bet is they're about 8 feet across. But nevertheless, the point that I'm making is, if you think about 800 turbines, I've talked to people, and I've mentioned this on the show, who live in communities that are completely surrounded by these wind farms. And there are farmers who live on that land and have wind turbines within a couple of hundred yards of their homes.
Yeah.
And, this is something that is just, they do it in a way that's very matter of fact. Want a wind turbine there? Sure, let's do that. And the farmers love them because it means that they've got a steady income from leasing the little plot of land at the bottom of that wind turbine to the company, and that provides them with a steady income that is not going to be affected by drought, that is not going to be affected by the price of corn, and that income is there. It makes their lives a whole lot easier.
So instead of harvesting corn or whatever,
they're harvesting wind, but it's
right?
in addition.
Yep, in addition.
And they can raise cattle and so forth under there. The cattle don't mind. We've made that observation many times. I've talked many times about the woman I talked to in Roscoe, Texas.
Yep.
And asked, how does it feel to live in a wind farm? And she said, oh, I never thought about the fact that we live in a wind farm. I suppose we do. Well, we like it. And this is an attitude that is reflected by attitudes of a lot of people in that area.
Well, I've got a sound meter.
Yeah.
So I measure the sound in my bedroom every once in a while.
Yeah.
And when a car goes by on Elliott Street, it's louder than turbines are going to be permitted to emit in Vermont.
And I've told you, when I lived in New Hampshire and I was up on a mountaintop, I could hear trucks that were 5 miles away.
Yeah.
And I could hear trains that that were well in excess of 7.5 miles away.
We were both at this farm in Searsburg.
Yes.
And you could hear the trucks with their great Jake brakes 5 miles away going down the hill.
Yeah, and the guy who was standing next to us talking was louder than the wind turbines that was 100 yards off. Okay.
Well, we wouldn't have been able to hear him if he wasn't.
That's true.
This is a very interesting article coming up here.
Okay. This is from the Aberdeen Evening Express.
Yeah, let's...
what do you got for a title for the article?
I'm going to put us
You
up
just lost it there.
while I read it here. Wind turbines alone provided double the amount of energy needed for Scottish homes for the month of October.
What? Strong winds and storms in October helped Scottish turbines produce more than 1.7 million megawatt hours of electricity for the national grid. Wind power provided more than 100% of electricity demand for Scotland. This is total demand, including industrial and everything, for 15 days during October. That's half the month. And it supplied enough electric power for all of Scotland's homes on 28 days out of the 31 in the month.
Now, part of that, by the way, was the tail end of a hurricane.
Yes.
And hurricanes never go up that way.
Well, this was Hurricane Ophelia.
Yes, Ophelia, exactly. Which was it's an anomaly.
It's an anomaly. It formed in the eastern part of the North Atlantic, where hurricanes never form.
I don't think it's ever happened.
And it went north, and the first thing that it did was it hit Ireland with 119 mile an hour winds,
which they're not accustomed to.
I want to point out, Hurricane Harvey was the most destructive in terms of dollar damage hurricane by a factor of over 1.5. I think it was 1.6. Ever in the history of the United States. Much more worse than Katrina. It flooded, most of the damage was done in areas that were not in flood zones. It was considered a 25,000-year event.
Is the one that hit Houston?
It hit Houston.
Yeah, we'll see a picture of that.
Harris County in Houston it was the third 500-year event in 3 years in Harris County.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It does. Hurricane, what was the one with the I? I'm thinking Igor, but it's not. It's Irma.
Irma, yep.
Hurricane Irma was the most powerful hurricane on record to form in the Atlantic Ocean as opposed to the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. And it came along 2 weeks later. 2 weeks after that, Maria came along. It was more powerful in terms of central pressure than either of those other two. And then Ophelia came 2 weeks after that. So in 8 weeks, you had 4 of these record-breaking hurricanes. And Donald Trump says, oh, we've had worse storms. Okay.
Okay, this next one's very interesting here.
Yeah, and here we've got solar collectors of the type that we were talking about, except that they're kind of weird looking.
Yeah, well, this is the other type of solar collection.
Yeah,
we've seen some of these before.
Yeah, but not like this.
Those things are parabolic reflectors.
Yep.
And instead of aiming up at a tower, they're aiming at a pipe that's right in their focus point.
Probably full of salt. And what you're doing is you're heating up salt, which is molten, and then it's going to get pumped into a big vat of of molten salt, which produces electricity by being used to make steam. But in this case, all those solar reflectors are under the roofs of a greenhouse.
That is interesting. You can see the roofs there in that picture.
Yep. And the reason for that is because they don't want the desert sand to be blown onto those troughs.
Which there's a lot of desert sand in Oman.
Sure is. Okay, this is from Clean Technica. Got a title?
Developers complete first block of the 1021 megawatt Mira solar plant for an Oman oil field.
There you go.
There you go.
Petroleum Development Oman and Glass Point Solar have announced completion of the first block of one of the world's largest solar plants, the 1,021 megawatt Mira solar plant in Oman. Each of the 36 blocks has a separate greenhouse protecting its solar array from harsh conditions on the oil field, such as strong winds and dust storms. And I could just see, the damage that sand blowing in the wind would do to those reflectors.
Probably blast them quickly so that they're etched. Yeah.
And they're going to etch the glass, but I think probably very much slower. And the glass is easy to replace.
And the heat is going to get through the etched glass.
I'll tell you one thing: I would not want to be in that greenhouse during the heat of the day.
That is a little warm.
Yeah.
This is interesting. What they're using this electricity that they're generating for.
Yep.
The plant will deliver 6,000 tons of steam per day for use in thermal enhanced oil recovery, in which steam is injected into an oil reservoir to heat the oil, making it easier to pump to the surface.
Help.
But the good news is this will reduce the amount of natural gas they use to generate that steam and result in saved CO2 emissions of 300,000 tons per year.
My bet is that.
So this isn't hay.
I know. My bet is that this solar system is going to get used for something else in fairly short order.
Like what?
Generating electricity.
Well, they're going to run out of oil.
Yeah, they are.
Or if they don't run out of a market for it first.
Yes. Well, I think we should move on. We're up to Wednesday, November 8th, and we've got an item from CNN.
And we got 10 minutes left.
Do we? Okay.
The green level.
Do we have more to talk about the petroleum development of Oman?
I don't think so, because we don't know much about it.
All right. So we are up to November 8th, and we have an item from CNN.
Yeah, we can talk about the last item here because it's timely.
Yeah.
But not this item. As Syria joins the Paris Climate Agreement, the U.S. stands alone.
What was the Central American country? Was it Honduras? Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Nicaragua. Yeah. Nicaragua said this thing is not going far enough.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And then they decided they'd sign it anyway. Syria, understandably, said, and I'm not saying that what they're doing with their people is understandable, but given the circumstances, it's understandable that they would say this.
Well, they're in the middle of a
civil war. They said, we're a little busy for signing this right now. And so Donald Trump says, we're pulling out of the agreement, and that leaves the United States as the only country, or at least the only sizable country in the world. And by sizable, I mean bigger than Monaco.
Well, the U.S. trails only China as the world's worst emitter of carbon dioxide.
Yeah, and that won't happen. It won't go on for very long.
No, because China's taken steps to change that.
We talked about all the factories that were closing in China last week.
Yep.
I'm not 100% sure that that's actually happening, but they closed 40,000 factories pending
that's a lot of factories.
Pending correction of their emissions problems. So there you go. Should we move on?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, we have a picture here of flooding. We promised this picture of flooding in Houston.
We do. Let's get
and this item is from Think Progress.
And that's a city street and a highway in Houston. That's not a river.
Yeah, that's right.
You can see the highway sign there, and the rest of it goes right through downtown.
This is downtown Houston.
It's sort of like Wall Street getting flooded.
Yeah.
Which could happen one of these years.
Absolutely, it could, yes.
White House admits Trump climate policies will destroy U.S. coastal property.
What?
This is interesting. this is almost poetic justice.
Yes, it is. The massive climate report released by the Trump administration makes clear that its climate policies will destroy every last bit of U.S. and global coastal property in decades to come, and over $1 trillion of U.S. coastal property will eventually be valueless. So if Donald Trump wants to sell one of those many coastal properties he's got in Florida, he's going to have to face the fact, and the buyer is going to have to face the fact that the property has less value than it otherwise would because it's so close to the beach.
Well, the article was talking about the insurance companies.
Yeah.
That once they get wind of this, these properties will be uninsurable.
Well,
and when they're uninsurable, you can't sell them.
But here's the deal. In the United States, things are more complicated than that because the United States has guaranteed flood insurance.
Yeah.
This comes from the 1960s. I forget what the hurricane was, but somebody said, wait a minute, we could have 2 hurricanes like that in the same year. And if we did, if insurance companies would go bankrupt and the people who had these properties would not be able to repair them. This would cause ramifications. It would run through the entire economic system in the United States. So they decided that there would be guaranteed flood insurance. In 2004...
That will change if they have to pay a lot.
Well, that's the thing. In 2004, there was a law passed called the Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2004, and it was actually passed, I think, in the Senate unanimously.
Uh-huh.
And what it did was it said, if a property gets claims in excess of $1,000 twice, that property, in 10 years, that property is no longer guaranteed to be insured.
Bingo. I remember reading that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, Donald Trump's, Mar-a-Lago, is it in danger? Well, it had a sinkhole appear in the road right in front of it.
It's on low land.
It's on low
No
land. It's right
question
across from the water. Yeah.
But from the article here, the only question is when and not if that $1 trillion bubble will burst.
Yes. And if Donald Trump has his way, it'll be all the faster. Okay, move on.
I'm just thinking that I got a lot of information here on this article.
Aha, okay.
I don't think I want to read it all. But
Okay.
Bloomberg has something to say about it.
Well, I think people can go to this and learn a lot. This is Wednesday, November 8th. Our next item is
there is a quick takeaway. It's kind of cynical. Who will be with the smart money that gets out early, and who will be with the other kind of money?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move along
Donald
here.
Trump bought a house for $40 million, as I recall. Put it up on the market for $110 million.
Yeah.
Sold it to a Russian businessman for $95 million.
Yeah.
And it was torn down within 3 years because it had a mold problem that made it unmanageable. Our next item is from Clean Technica.
This is an interesting one, too.
It is.
The EPA estimates rolling back the Clean Power Plan could cost 100,000 deaths by 2050. This is just another aspect of what we've talked about several times on this
but
show.
it's more stuff coming out from the federal government.
Yep.
In its mania to prove how horrible the Clean Power Plan is, the EPA rejiggered the numbers and found that the Clean Power Plan would save more lives than the Obama officials had thought.
That's not what they wanted to find.
No. Maybe it was. Maybe it was just Rick Perry who didn't want to find that. But the people who actually did the work said, I'm going to stick it to this guy. Oddly enough, this means rolling back its provisions could lead to between 40,000 and 100,000 premature deaths in America by the year 2050.
There's a takeaway here that's worth reading.
Yes.
The devil is in the details, and we're definitely in figures lie and liars figure territory here.
Yes.
In a final analysis, preventing death and disease may not be a legal reason for limiting emissions from coal-fired generating plants.
Our last item is from etenergyworld.com.
Yeah, this is a good article. This is a very detailed article.
Yep.
Over $270 billion investment in new power infrastructure could be avoided via digital technology. And this is from the International Energy Agency.
Yeah. Digital technologies are set to transform the global energy landscape, making it more reliable and sustainable, a report by the International Energy Agency says. Demand-side response from buildings, industry, and transport could provide 185 gigawatts of flexibility, avoiding $270 billion of new infrastructure investment through 2040. Now that's over $10 billion a year. You think
Chicken feed.
Chicken feed. There you go. If we let's just tell them if they want to lose $10 billion, let's lose it in the state of Vermont.
I think we ought to say goodbye. We've run out of stuff to talk about.
There you go. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a good week.